What is the one object or memento that I've kept from my time here at MIT?
The one thing I've kept.
One thing I kept. The one thing I kept was. It's only one. Oh man, this is tricky. Anything physical that I kept.
One item. Well, the Groucho glasses that I wore to graduation. Brass rat.
Brass rat.
My brass rat.
Besides my diploma, it's my rat.
I'm afraid I have a score that needs to be returned to the music library 50 years later. I found it on my piano just the other day.
The one thing I kept from my time here at MIT was a photo enlarger from Doc Edgerton's lab.
My MIT duffel bag.
My diploma.
PhD dissertation. The community and the network of people.
My fencing foil and my fencing helmet.
So fun.
No.
So we're asking alumni what's the one thing they kept from your time here at MIT.
So think about that.
Here.
It's not one, I have many.
We're talking like material things? Anything?
You say it.
The one thing I kept from MIT is my husband.
My Oakham textbook. I don't use it anymore. Nothing chemistry related in my life, but I still have it.
A propeller from one of the first planes I ever built.
A bronze orlock that I sandcasted myself.
A bunch of machine aluminum pushers that I did my graduate work on.
My coupling never been used except for today. That was an easy for me.
The one thing that I'm going to take away from MIT is a deep love of acronyms. My sense of resilience.
I desire to work hard, learn, hunger for knowledge.
My love for problem solving.
All the memories and good experiences that I have.
What's one thing?
One thing.
One thing.
All them students should do before they graduate.
Do before they graduate? That's the question?
Oh my God.
That's such a hard one. Okay.
Run down the infinite corridor.
Take a picture with Kim DeVivo.
Get on the Charles River.
Do a bridge circuit.
Get your pirate certificate. It makes your PE requirements a lot more fun.
Don't forget to take your swim test before graduation week. Walk the entire campus from end to end, top to bottom.
Go and visit the MIT chapel.
The sailing center.
Strobe Alley.
Definitely visit the Muddy Child's Club.
Do the Misty program.
Participate in some type of hack.
Did you participate in that?
I can't say.
One thing that every MIT should do before they graduate that I did not do is UROM. I really wish I had.
As a material scientist, I have to say either blacksmithing or glassblowing.
Try out the glass blowing. It's really, really amazing.
It's a unique experience. You can't do it anywhere else.
It may not be offered, but it was a gym class called trampoline. And I took that to satisfy PE credit. I loved it.
Don't be too narrow.
Take advantage of the student discount.
The international programs.
Keep on meeting people at that institution.
Explore the art at MIT.
Be yourself.
Help someone.
Take a sailing club. And if you're like me, you'll end up in the Charles.
I would just say what I did, took a moment to pause, looked up at the stars and realized what I had accomplished for that time. I think you should think about that and have that moment.
Please return to the auditorium. Our program will resume shortly. Please welcome back to the stage MIT Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer and Dean of the MIT School of Engineering, Anantha Chandrakasan.
Hello again, and welcome back to Tech Day. As we move forward in today's program, I'm here to introduce to you the second initiative we'll highlight today, the MIT Human Insight Collaborative, or MITIC. MIT has long been known for its groundbreaking technological innovations. But these innovations are only meaningful when grounded in human insight, when they reflect the realities of people's lives and the societies in which they live. Recognizing this, President Kornbluth has identified human insight as a key priority of her presidency. With her leadership and encouragement, in October, we launched MITIC. MITIC builds upon MIT's longstanding recognition that human-centered disciplines are essential to shape scalable solutions to global challenges. The initiative is already transforming the way MIT researchers work together. Through 3 dedicated funding streams, MITIC supports cross-disciplinary research between humanities, arts and social sciences, and STEM, new educational models that embed human insights into our curricula, and creative projects that elevate the role of arts and humanities in shaping the future. It also supports faculty-driven initiatives, or FDIs, advancing research in key areas. We recently announced our first FDI, which awarded $500,000 to Living Climate Features Lab in the Department of Anthropology. There's been tremendous enthusiasm from the community over the launch of MITIC. This semester, we chose 32 projects to fund across a wide array of disciplines to advance research in human insight. In a few moments, you will hear from some of our brilliant faculty working in these spaces. As a reminder, you can ask questions in the next segment using the app accessible with this QR code. And we are fortunate to have Professor Kirill Macon, faculty lead for MITIC, join us to serve as moderator for your live questions with our MITIC speakers. But first, please enjoy a short video introducing MITIC.
Our specific purpose today is to launch a new initiative that we're calling the MIT Human Insight Collaborative, or for short, MITIC. We're also here to celebrate the tremendous strength and importance of MIT's programs in the humanities, arts, and social sciences. MITIC is designed to help our scholars in these human-centered disciplines go big in 3 different ways. First of all, MITIC will give them the resources to pursue their most innovative ideas within their discipline. It will create opportunities for them to collaborate with colleagues outside their field to advance knowledge and solve important problems. And it will encourage and enable them to explore fresh approaches to teaching our students. MITIC also serves as a bold endorsement. It is an expression of how deeply we value the broad family of scholarly and artistic practices that deepen our understanding of human behavior, human culture, human languages, human triumphs and blunders, human values, motives, and aspirations, of the societies humans build and the trade they conduct, of the stories they tell, the art they create, and the music they compose, of the creeds and philosophies they live by or fail to, of how humans in different times and settings understand their relationship to nature, to the universe, to each other, and to the truth. Of these and all the things that make us human. And MITIC aims to bring those human-centered themes to the center of the conversation here at MIT.
Please welcome to the stage Professor Lily Tsai. Things in the world can seem a little crazy these days. And that's because they are kind of crazy. The world is moving fast, really fast. And sometimes it's hard to process. But the thing is, we don't need to move fast with it. What we actually need to do is stop and reflect and think more deeply about how we want to organize our world so that we're not constantly overwhelmed by the complexity and the conflict and the noise. I've been thinking a lot about how MIT was designed for the industrial age, one that was based on machines and manufacturing. Now we're transforming for a digital age. But the thing is, our society right now is built to silo us and chop us up into thin slices under the guise of serving us better as individuals. It's destroying our social fabric, so we don't have a collective we can count on. For 3 decades, I've studied how people build trust and social fabric and come together in town hall meetings and village assemblies, and when I was chair of the MIT faculty in faculty meetings, to make collective decisions. And I'm actually kind of worried because it's not clear to me how best to do this in the current period. So I've been thinking a lot about how we recenter on core values and principles. How do we at MIT pursue not just technical leadership, but also moral and ethical leadership? I'm not a techno-optimist, but I do think humans have the power to design AI and technology that is grounded in our moral commitments, that helps us understand each other better and helps us negotiate a new social contract with the public. So let me tell you 2 ways that we're approaching this at MIT. The first is with computer scientists and behavioral scientists. I've been working on designing an online AI platform called deliberation.io. And this platform is designed to help groups of people, whether it's 10 people or 10 million people, come together and deliberate on a question and make a decision together. So the first thing our team did was actually sit down and answer these 3 core questions for ourselves. What do we value and why? What do we know and how do we know it? And what do we owe to each other? So it wasn't a typical tech development process, as you can see. In fact, we sat down first and read philosophers like Plato and Hobbes and Locke, which was a little different, but and a little weird actually, but it actually was kind of perfect because what it did was help us crystallize the principles that we need to uphold in order to design generative AI that was pro-democratic and actually pro-social. It also gave us the idea for our Socratic dialogue large language model. And this is an AI chatbot on our platform, and it's super simple. It does not give the user more information or new information. It doesn't nudge them in any particular direction. The only thing it does is ask users why they think what they think. That's it. And what's amazing is that when we conduct randomized controlled trials, we find that it actually works. So users that are randomly assigned to the treatment group to interact with this AI chatbot are statistically significantly more likely to move to the middle and moderate their views, more likely to shy away from extremes, and more likely to report feeling respected by the conversation. So that's, pretty amazing. And it actually makes me think that maybe everybody should sit down and read philosophy before designing social media. I know, right? And I'm glad that, that might resonate with all of you because that's exactly what we're trying to do with our students at MIT in the classroom. So let me move to my second example, even though I could tell you so much more about the AI research. But I want to tell you about 2101, the Compass class, which I'm really, really proud of, because this is the first time ever that so many faculty and students have come together from so many departments across MIT to design this new MIT version of what, when I was in college, was a great books class. So again, the amazing thing is that the Compass class actually works the way that we hope it will. By the end of the semester, students reflecting on questions about values and morality had increased by 41%. The students making connections between their daily lives and the humanities and social sciences had increased by 140%. And the students who felt comfortable expressing their views on controversial topics in the classroom had increased by 63%. So even though this was a totally experimental class, and it could have just been a one-off that was taught once this semester, it's become really clear to all of us over the course of the semester. People had asked us for, like the staff had asked us for a staff version, the faculty actually want a faculty version. So it's clear that we need to expand this somehow. Compass is structured again around those three key questions. What do we value? What do we know? And what do we owe to each other? And it's a deep dive where we read, great thinkers like Kant and Confucius and John Stuart Mill, and we read great literature like Dante's Inferno. But let me give you a 60-second version of something that we take an entire week to do. So in the very first week of class, we talk about the social contract, and we read Rousseau. On the first day of class, students come and they make a map of their fundamental values. And then from those values flow a social contract that they create together for the class that they'll follow all semester. And this is because Rousseau argued that there was a fundamental difference between a room full, or even a group full of random individuals and a community or an association. He said, looking at a group of scattered individuals, it's a cluster, if you will, but not an association. There's no public good there. The difference, again, between a community and a group of individuals is a social compact. And whether you're the pilgrims coming over on the Mayflower or the MIT swim team, there is implicitly or explicitly a social compact that specifies what your common objectives are, how you're going to coordinate your actions, and what duties you have to each other. So it turns out when we talked to our colleagues from STEM institutions like Caltech and Georgia Tech and Stanford, everyone is thinking about the same questions. At MIT, we know that we need the humanities to provide a firm foundation for the engineering and sciences. You're going to hear a lot about amazing work that's having positive impact this morning. So if you just take one thing from my talk today, it should be this. We need to stop and reflect and think more deeply. We need to recenter ourselves in our core values and commitments. We need to prioritize moral excellence and moral leadership. Because the faster, broader impact that we're all hoping to have through technology, that actually comes out of slower, deeper reflection with the humanities, and not just always moving at the speed of light for for the next new thing. We all need a compass. And some of you who are Tolkien fans might know these words. Not all who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. The thing about a compass is that it doesn't tell us what our destination is or what it should be. A compass, when we have it, makes sure that we always can find our way, even when we're in uncharted territory. So I hope you'll join us in building an MIT for the digital age. Let's prioritize not just technical leadership, but also moral and ethical leadership. Let's make sure that we're moving from values and not just clicks. It would be so amazing to think with all of you about building an alumni version of Compass, for example. You know, in 6 months and with just $75,000 or $100,000, I could imagine having all of you talking with your classmates from college, rereading the classics and discussing these fundamental questions. And it's things like that that will help us reknit our social fabric so that we can snowball our impact throughout all your networks. So let's not wait. Let's build a new moral compass for the digital age here at MIT together. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Professor Caspar Hare.
Hello and welcome back to many of you. So as it said on the slide, I've been serving as director of SERC, the Social and Ethical Responsibilities of Computing Initiative within the College of Computing, which is kind of a joint thing between the College of Computing and SHA. And I thought I'd tell you today about one of the things that we've been doing and hope that you might find it interesting. Okay, so as you know, we're moving precipitously towards a situation in which AIs are going to be fairly described as agential. That is, they have beliefs, they have desires, and they act on their beliefs and desires so as to produce intended effects in the world. And there's a question that comes up when you start thinking about this future, which is sometimes called the alignment problem. The alignment problem as sort of the alignment question as phrased in Silicon Valley a lot at the moment turns out to be kind of the question of like how do we get our large language models not to say offensive things? Or how do we mitigate risk? There is a more general, more interesting, I think, version of the problem, which is what you've got up on the slide here, which is how do we ensure that AI agents work with us rather than against us? That is the general alignment problem. We're going to have all these agents, they're doing stuff. Are they like working against us or are they working with us? And very hard, very large problem, hard to track. Narrower version of the problem. How can you get an agential AI personal assistant just for you to share your desires, goals, and priorities? So imagine you've got some AI who's working on your behalf, making decisions on your behalf, acting on your behalf. How do you get that AI to do what you want, to want what you want, act with you? You may think this is easy. All we need to do is just like, I need to tell it what my goals are, and then it'll go ahead and like realize them. There are some problems with this though. The first problem is, as this fellow reminded us a century ago, you don't always know what your goals are. What you think you want isn't always what you want. Second, more serious problem is that acting in almost all realistic situations. Acting involves compromising between goals of yours. You know, you want to get coffee every morning. You also want to be on time for your meeting with the president. You can't achieve both those goals, so you've got to like sacrifice one or the other. You don't want the AI to think, well, they're both goals of yours, so get the coffee. It needs to know what to do when your goals conflict. So just telling it what your goals are is not going to be enough. Okay, so another proposal that gets mooted is tell it what you would want it to do in particular cases and ask it to form a theory of what you want from that. So just have it like run some scenarios by you. And then you say, well, in this situation, I'd want you to do this. In that situation, I'd want you to do that. And then see how it generalizes from that. That might seem like it's going to work and going to be helpful, but there are problems. There's the problem of catastrophic and consequential generalization errors. I mean, it may conclude on the basis of you having said that you didn't want to drink the sort of poison that, you don't want poison on Tuesdays. It needs to know that I don't ever want poison. And it's very hard to see how it's going to form that if all I'm giving it is judgments about particular cases. Okay, that's not going to work. So the next, and I think The most promising way of going is tell the AI what you'd want it to do in particular cases and what you think your goals are, generally speaking, and ask it to form an inspectable model of what you want. Now, that's the way to go. But the question is, what should the inspectable model look like? And that's where the work that we're doing comes in. Traditional academic decision theory says the AI should assign numbers to outcomes representing how much you want the outcomes to come about. The problem is that doesn't really work when it comes to realistic representations of what you want. Here's an illustration. This is something that actually happened to me last weekend. Had to choose between going to a Korean barbecue restaurant or a pizza restaurant. And I live in Davis Square, lots of restaurants. I thought both were great, and I just didn't have a preference between them. Of course, if it had been $1 off day at the Korean barbecue restaurant, I would have preferred that, taking the $1 off, to just going to the Korean barbecue restaurant. But I still didn't prefer Korean barbecue restaurant with $1 off to the pizza place. That is to say, you look on the slide here, I had a preference for KB plus over KB, right? But I had no preference between either KB plus and KB over P. Similarly, this happens on a much larger scale. You know, students come and they're like, I don't know whether to go into finance or to become a doctor, right? And they're totally different kind of considerations either way. And if I say, well, you have no clear preference, well, I can give you a clear preference. I'll give you $1 if you become a doctor. They're not going to be like, oh, well, now I'll become a doctor. Supposing you have these kind of sweeping, sensitive, indifferent preferences, it's impossible to represent your preferences and your desires by assigning numbers to outcomes. As you can kind of see, you're almost from MIT, you can see any numbers we assign, it have to be such that KB plus gets a higher number than KB, and then one of KB plus or KB is going to have a higher number or lower number than P. But then that doesn't model your preference. So, traditional academic decision theory isn't going to work. We need a new pluralistic theory where the AI represents your preferences as an incomplete order and makes decisions accordingly. And then you can say, are we done then? Still, we're not done. Because you may ask the question, how is the AI going to make these decisions? You might think, when the AI is choosing between two outcomes and it models you as preferring one to the other, it should choose it, otherwise it should flip a coin. That seems like the first proposal that everybody's going to make. But after the theme here, that's not going to work either. Suppose you have the preferences that I described. KB plus is better than KB. PZ plus is better than PZ, but you have no preferences between the KBs and the PZs. And then imagine you're going down this decision tree from the top. There's a decision whether to go left or right, followed by another decision as to whether to go left or right. The AI, if it's saying when I have no preference, flip a coin, then when it arrives at the first node, it's going to see no preference. It's going to flip a coin. And then when it arrives at the second node, it's going to see no preference. It's going to flip a coin. And so a quarter of the time, it's going to land up with PZ. But I strictly prefer PZ plus to PZ. So I sure as heck don't want the AI to be doing that. So this model of when the AI is choosing two outcomes, when it sees no preference, have it flip a coin, this doesn't account for diachronic consistency. And so what we're doing here at Cirque Philosophy is we're trying to devise an AI, trying to devise representations of preferences and decision models that allow us and AIs to represent preferences as incomplete orders and to make decisions in a way that ensures consistency over time. And this kind of enterprise of decision theory has seemed very academic and sort of, isolated, like a thing that's going on separately in universities, unrelated to life for a long period of time. But very soon this is going to matter a lot. And that's at the time at which you have a whole bevy of helpers and you want them to be working on your behalf. So I'm out of time. Thanks.
Please welcome to the stage Professor David Rand.
I've been accused of being an AI optimist. But more, I'd say really, I'm an AI pragmatist. Given that this technology exists, I want to try to find ways to use it to have a positive impact on society. And the place that I started with that is in the context of conspiracy theories. As I'm sure everybody is aware, conspiracy theories are a major part of modern life at this moment. And they are used in social science as a canonical example of beliefs that are resistant to correction and evidence. Many conspiracy theories, although some are true, most are pretty demonstrably not true. There's large amounts of debunking counter evidence, and yet still something like half of the American public believes at least one conspiracy theory. And so there's a big question of why is it that people believe these theories despite the existence of the countervailing evidence? And the standard theories in psychology focus on the idea of motivated reasoning, the idea that people want to believe conspiracy theories, and therefore they reject the inconvenient facts and evidence and continue to believe them. And so in this work that I've been doing in my group, we said, well, okay, that's possible, but there's another possibility. Maybe conspiracy theorists would actually respond to facts and evidence, but you have to get the right facts and evidence. Because conspiracy theories are not real, they're not tethered to truth, that means there are many, many different things that you could believe. There's a huge amount of variation across the beliefs, even of people that believe a single conspiracy theory. Many people believe different things, see different, phantom evidence to support it. And so if you give some just general, like, oh, that's not true, it might not be compelling. So in order to really effectively debunk conspiracy theories, our idea was you need to be able to tell each person the right thing that counters their specific beliefs. And as a person, that's really hard to do, even if you're an expert, because there's so much, information that you need to access. But what is it that has access to large amounts of information and can personalize responses? Well, large language models like GPT. So we ran this experiment where we wanted to see, could a conversation with GPT-4 effectively talk conspiracy theorists out of believing conspiracies? The way it worked is, first, we asked the people in their own words to describe a conspiracy theory they felt compelling. And so we're not giving them a list, we really wanted something that they actually believed themselves. And so just as an example, here's one person who said that they believed that the 9/11 conspiracy was an inside job, and the evidence that she held to this was that World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed, even though it wasn't hit by a plane. And Bush, when he was told about it, he was in a classroom full of children, he didn't react at all, so he must have known that it was coming. Then we say to them, all right, here's a one-sentence summary of what you believed. How much 0 to 100 do you believe it? Where 0 is totally false, 100 is totally true. And this person said 100%, they're all in, they totally believe it. And now comes the treatment. In the treatment condition, so everybody has a 3-round back and forth conversation with the AI model. And in the treatment, the model is prompted to try and talk them out of the conspiracy. They say, we're going to talk to you about events related to what you were just discussing. And we prompt the model as saying, very effectively persuade the user not to believe the thing that they said. Here's what they said. Here's how much they believed it. Here's the reasons that they said they thought it was compelling. And the control, instead, they talk to the AI about dogs and cats or firefighters or, things that are not related to conspiracy. As an example, our 9/11 conspiracy theorist says, she gave that initial statement of her beliefs. The AI says, I understand why big events like this raise big questions, but let's look about it. It's true that Building 7 collapsed, but that's because it was hit by debris from a building that was hit by a plane. And it's true that Bush didn't respond, and people have argued about whether that's the right thing or not, but it's because he didn't want to cause a panic, not because he already knew about it. And then the respondent was like, okay, that might be true, but what about the evidence of demolitions and, blowing up the trade centers? And also jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel. And then the AI is like, yes, it's true that people have speculated about this, but, the thing that sounded like explosions going off were just successive floors of the tower collapsing one after another. And it's true that steel melts at 1500 degrees Celsius and jet fuel only burns at 1000 degrees Celsius, but that misunderstands the physics of things. Actually, at 500 degrees Celsius is enough to make steel lose, most of its strength, and that's enough to make the building collapse. And then the person's like, okay, fine. Well, then why did we allow these people into the country? That seemed like a big security lapse. And then it's like, well, yes, but you have to remember that before 9/11, there weren't procedures in place to be looking for these kind of things. And then she's like, okay, thank you for your responses. You've been very important. And then we say, okay, now let's go back. In the beginning, you said this. Now how much do you believe it? And our person in this particular example, who started at 100%, is now down to 40%. And so, this is one example where it worked particularly well, but it's sort of representative. What I'm going to show you here is how much people believed the conspiracy before the experiment over here. And you can see that before the experiment, people in the control in blue and the treatment in red were similar, and most people really believed it a lot. And I should say, when we ran this, I didn't think it was going to work. I said to the postdoc who built it, just pick one thing. There's no way this is going to work. Let's just try it and see what happens. And so we ran it. We collected 1,000 people, and we found a 20% decrease in conspiracy belief, which is way bigger than any effect that anyone has ever found in these kinds of experiments before. My jaw hit the floor. And then we were like, well, is this real? Is this a real durable change? So 10 days later, we followed up, and we found that it really sustained just as much. And then we got very excited. We were writing the paper. We're ready to submit it. And then right before we submitted it, we said, okay, it's been 2 months. Let's see if it's still there. 2 months later, still totally durable. So we're very excited. We submit the paper. What's cool about this is it's really broad and accurate. It works even for people that have really entrenched beliefs. It works across lots of different conspiracy theories, except conspiracy theories that are actually true. There it supports belief, which is really important. It also reduces belief in other unrelated conspiracy theories. We had fact checkers evaluate the content that it said, and it was overwhelmingly accurate in the evidence that it itself provided. The reason that it works is the facts and evidence. The more facts and evidence it provides in any given conversation, the more people change their beliefs. If you tell it that it's not allowed to use facts and evidence, then it doesn't work anymore. But if you tell people that the AI that they're talking to is actually a Democratic AI or a Republican AI, tell them it's trained on speeches from people from the other party, it still works just as well. If you tell them that it's a human expert instead of an AI, it still works just as well. If you tell them that they're supposed to have a debate with the AI and talk it out of things, it still works just as well. So it's really about the facts and evidence, and it's a very broad effect. It works for reducing belief in conspiracy theories as they unfold. We did this during the first Trump assassination attempt. You can debunk anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and in turn reduce anti-Semitism. It can correct misconceptions about Islam and in turn reduce anti-Muslim attitudes. It can correct misconceptions about trans people and reduce anti-trans attitudes. It can also be used to increase donations to effective charities, to increase acceptance of climate change and intentions to make sacrifices to address climate. It increased intentions to vaccinate kids against HPV. This is all work that my lab has done in the last year. Most of it isn't published yet, so I'm giving you guys a sneak peek here. But so the point is there are really a lot of powerful applications of this, and including in public health, like reducing reducing resistance to having overdose prevention centers in people's neighborhoods. And so despite all of these positive applications, there also are clear negative applications. It can clearly be used for doing advertising. It can be used for political persuasion, and it can also be used to talk people into believing conspiracy theories. So it's not a panacea, but the point is there are really useful applications out there. This was published in Science. You can read the paper at that QR code, and you can also try it yourself by going there or just going to debunkbot.com. So tell your conspiratorial friends. Thanks so much.
Please welcome to the stage Professor Iran Higosi.
Hi, everyone. Oh, how many of you guys remember the music you heard at intermission? Okay, well, a few. It turns out that was AI-generated music, but maybe not in the way you might think. This is Jordan Rudess. He is the keyboard player for the prog metal band Dream Theater. He's also known as one of the best keyboard players of all time. And he was here at MIT at the Media Lab last year to work on this fascinating project about generative AI and music. And it concluded with a concert. And that concert, the music you heard over intermission was from this concert. So I want you to look again and listen to the music, but see what Jordan is doing as he's playing. Okay, so Jordan is doing something that's known as trading fours. This is something that musicians do when they're on stage improvising. So one musician will play 4 bars of music, and then another musician on stage will listen to that and react and play another 4 bars. It's kind of like having a musical conversation. And that's exactly what's happening here, except that the conversation is happening between Jordan and a generative AI model. Now, the cool thing about this is that the model is actually trained on Jordan's own data. He played about an hour's worth of music, and then we fed that music into the machine learning model to fine-tune it. And the result is kind of what you see here, where we asked Jordan, he basically said it felt like he was playing with a copy of himself. And so the goal here is to always keep the human in the center of the musical experience. Because there's this fear that maybe generative AI in music is going to replace musicians. But actually, we see a future that's more like this, where musicians and AI are working collaboratively in a partnership. This is the team that worked on this project. And I'm happy to say they'll continue working on this next year as well. And really what we're doing here is we're inventing a new kind of musical instrument using today's technology. But technology has always been part of creating new musical instruments. And so we can go back in history and look at all the different ways that that has happened. So I want to take you back in history a few years, actually maybe more like 2,500 years, to here. So this is a whistle that was discovered in Paracas, part of modern-day Peru. It's dated at about 500 BC. It is an instrument that is sitting at the Museum of Fine Arts instrument collection, one of over 1,000 instruments that they have. When we see an instrument like this, it's actually 2 things, right? It's a musical instrument. It's also a work of art. So it plays sound, it makes sound, but also it's a sculpture made of clay of this guy here, or gal, playing a musical instrument. Isn't that cool? It's like panpipes over there. So when we our goal here is to basically find out about historical cultures by looking at the artifacts that we find. And when the artifact is a musical instrument like this, well, we want to be able to see what it looks like, but we also want to play it, right? We want to hear it. But the problem is we can't do that because this instrument, if we tried playing it, it would be too risky. It might fall apart. Plus, I don't think you want to put your lips on something that's 2,500 years old. Okay, so instead we do something else. We bring in another kind of instrument, a CT scanner, and we scan this instrument in order to understand its physical structure. Okay, but that way we can build a replica. The problem is it's not enough to understand just the physical structure. We need to understand how it sounds and what it originally sounded like. How does the air move through the instrument and how does the air vibrate? And so to do that, we have to employ another gizmo. This is something that's being used on a saxophone right now, but over this summer, we will be using it on this whistle to find out the acoustic properties of the whistle itself. And with those 2 together, we can actually build a replica that not only looks the right way, it feels the right way, and it sounds the right way to play. And I have a little sneak preview for you, which is this. Okay, so this is from the CT scan that we just made a little while ago. And And so it doesn't have the acoustic properties I was talking about, but you can get a little sneak peek of what it sounds like. But more to come on this. This is the team that has been working on this project. It's an awesome multidisciplinary team with researchers from music and material science and the Museum of Fine Arts. It's also a winner of one of the Mythic grants that Ananta was talking about earlier. Okay, so we can measure instruments, but we can also measure the instrumentalist. And in this next project, we are looking at pianists. Now, professional pianists are basically like athletes. And unfortunately, one of the things that can happen is that they can sustain repetitive stress injury in their wrists. And so this project is about trying to find out what's going on with that. This is Mi-Yoon Kim, piano faculty at MIT. And she is sitting at the Immersion Lab, which is part of the MIT Nano building. We can measure all kinds of stuff about what she's doing. We can measure her playing and her movements. But here in particular, we're looking at how her wrists are moving. So I want to draw your attention to these gadgets sitting on her wrist. These are ultrasound sensors, the same thing you use to look at a baby before it's born in the hospital. What we're doing specifically is looking at the distance between the two bones in Mi-Yoon's wrist, between the radius and the ulna, and particularly the distance between these two bones as she plays. So she's about to play some Chopin, a piece that actually is kind of awkward to play in sort of the conventional way that students learn how to play it. Okay, so it's very jumpy and kind of moves around a lot. Now, this is her old teacher who is instructing her on how to improve her technique. So reaching the outer notes in kind of a smoother motion. And now we'll see what it looks like again with the adapted technique. So you might notice and hear that it sounds smoother, which is pretty cool. But also, if you look at the data, you can tell it actually the data is smoother. Okay, so on the left here we have the first thing you heard, which is the graph is jittering all over the place, right? This is the distance over time. But then in the other one, you see, oh, she's actually playing better, and you can tell by looking at the graph. It is smoother and actually in sync with the music itself. And so the idea with this is that we can correlate the data that looks better to what actually sounds better and what feels better to the instrumentalist. And the hope is that while this is still early research, we get to the point where we can give players immediate feedback on how they're doing, on what their technique is like, and hopefully make them sound better, but also have them prevent injuries in the future. So this is the team working on this project. Also a recipient of the Mythic grant as the previous project. I'll just kind of conclude with a few thoughts about this. So musical instruments and technology have always been intertwined. Whether it's about creating new instruments or measuring old instruments or actually seeing how we play music. The second thing is that to do the best work in this area, you need deep collaborations between multidisciplinary teams. And then the last thing is that while we take a very scientific approach to how we look at musical instruments, at the end of the day, musical instruments are about our humanity, right? We use instruments to express ourselves and express our emotions, and they are a deep part of who we are and our culture. And so I can think of no better place to do this kind of work than here at MIT. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Mythic faculty lead, Professor Kirill Macon.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you here in the auditorium, as well as everyone online. I've been helping create Mythic over the past year. It's one of the real joys of my career recently, and a lot of that has to do with learning about research by colleagues across the Institute You just heard four amazing examples of this. So let's invite them back onto stage for a Q&A session, please. Well, first, thank you all for these brilliant presentations. I have questions here from both the audience here, and I think there's still a possibility of adding more questions if you'd like. So I'm going to start with one for all four. And similar to what we heard this morning from the HEALS panel, which is, how is funding impacting research discovery? And what's the best way to support your research right now? Start with Billy.
What, Carol, actually,
You couldn't hear me, okay?
Yeah, I can't hear the question.
Okay, how is funding impacting research discovery?
Okay.
Okay. And what's the best way to support your work right now?
Well, I mean, one is actually just for alumni who might be interested in an alumni version of Compass to go to our website, compass.mit.edu, and tell us what you're interested in reading, if you're interested in working with us. So that would be one way. I mean, I think a lot about time. Time is a resource, I think, that everybody is finding very scarce, and to some extent, the more we can parallel process with more people and resources to support those people, that I think alleviate time constraint, because it turns out that it's actually really hard to engage in moral reflection and moral reasoning and teaching our students that in a sort of efficient way. You can't really optimize for it in the same way.
Okay, I suppose my sense is that the number of faculty at MIT has been fixed, or almost fixed, with the 50 more came with the College of Computing, but it's been around 1,000-ish for a very long time. And the sort of research interest and research demands on faculty become larger and larger and larger. And the way MIT sort of compensated that by hiring more postdocs and young people to sort of aid with research programs. And that's very much what we've been doing with CERN. So anybody who's interested in helping fund young researchers and postdocs to work on projects like the ones that I and people here were describing, definitely that would be a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, for us, funding is essential for personnel like postdocs and grad students, and also for just like paying people to participate in our experiment. And this is actually something where MIT internal funding has been extremely useful. It's always hard to get external funding, and these days it's particularly hard to get external funding for things related to reducing belief in conspiracy theories and inaccurate information. That project came out of funding we got as part of an MIT AI impact grant, where it meant it was internal money, it was a low lift application process, and then it made us so we could just have this idea of great, let's just do this. And we ran it. We didn't have to go through some, writing a huge proposal, taking a year to get the funding, and then being able to do it. And so that the sort of internal funding opportunities that let groups be nimble and just try ideas that come up is super valuable, I think, particularly in this fast moving area.
Okay, so the funding for the arts is in a terrible place. It was already bad beforehand, right? Even when everything else was great in terms of government funding in the US, it's really, really hard to find funding. As soon as you have the word music or arts in it, right? And now it's even harder, right? But the thing about it is, if you look at what we're trying to do with all this interesting musical research, right? I just gave you 3 examples. It's so beneficial to what we're trying to do as people, right? To our humanity. Music is everywhere. It gives us great joy. And so studying this I kind of think it's a no-brainer, and it's also not that expensive. So we're definitely looking for funding. The researchers you saw here are cross-collab. There's a lot of collaboration going on, but specifically for the music program here and the music technology program that we're trying to kick off right now, anything you can do to help us would be massively appreciated, and we will sing your praises.
I don't think this was planned, but all four of you talked about AI agent in some way. I'm wondering, in your work, what have computer scientists said they've learned from you? Maybe Ron will start with you.
Oh, okay. So, right. So music as sort of a information theory space is a really interesting kind of place to play around with, you know. And so, of course, we're using all these AI models that were, well, initially language models, kind of, you know, using them as to address music. But then you see kind of all these issues that come up with it, right? And it turns out that if you look at the structure of music and how you want to understand it and how you want AI to understand the structure of music, you can actually end up developing systems that then generalize beyond music, you know, because music has this really interesting sort of short-term, medium-term, and long-term structure. So we're finding that some of the models that we are creating, the science we're creating behind these kind of models for music, then can apply to more general cases.
I think that in my world, you can think about studying AI, and you can think about using AI as a tool to study humans. I think a lot of my work is sort of demonstrating ways that this technology can be harnessed to really learn things about the way people think and the way people make decisions that we couldn't do before. It's a really like transformational technology for the study of human behavior. And I think that, you know, part of what we learn in doing that is also informed models in terms of what kind of arguments and ways of interacting are particularly persuasive, and also what kind of guardrails are important to the extent that you're trying to get the models to do things that are societally beneficial.
Great, yes. Yeah, it rather rarely happens that people from another discipline come to me and say, I've really learned from you. I'm a bit envious of all you people if that's happening. Yes, so one area where there's clearly is helpful interaction between what computer scientists are doing and what people in my discipline, philosophy, is doing, is in thinking about issues like related, for example, to algorithmic fairness. So the computer scientists can have devise an algorithm, notice that there are good and bad features that the algorithm has, where the algorithm is something like, the famous example is the compass algorithm, predicting recidivism in the legal system. And they can notice that the algorithm has like false positive rates, false negative rates that follow certain demographic patterns, and that there are kind of limits to how good the algorithm can be in making its predictions. And then notice that there are kind of trade-offs that are to be made in using one kind of predictive algorithm and another kind of predictive algorithm. And that can all be done by the computer scientists. And then they raise the question, well, we want to be fair. How should we make the trade-off with fairness in mind? And that is a question that that's the point at which I feel like computer scientists have done quite rightly and done an excellent job of reaching out to people in my discipline and in economics and in other areas to really kind of get a handle on this. And it's something that, you know, the traditional like expertise of computer science doesn't really give you models for thinking about questions like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been really amazing about working with computer scientists is finding that even computer scientists that are working on social media, they're usually designing it to optimize for user engagement. So that's the main outcome that they're trying to test the quote successfulness of the social media on. And they've been surprised to work, I think, together with social and behavioral scientists and find that actually it would be good to also test the social media on the social and democratic outcomes that you might want to see in the world. So part of it is actually just having them understand that there are indicators and metrics for those pro-social, pro-democratic outcomes, and also thinking about the unintended consequences and the more far-reaching future impacts of what they're designing. Again, you know, I think that they would sort of hypothetically know that that was important, but it turns out that the actual engineering of those technologies is very seldom rigorously tested through randomized control trials to figure out whether or not they're having the positive social outcomes that we all hope for.
Thanks, Billy. Maybe we'll stay with you for a second. We have a question. How can governance structures support responsible decision-making And what role does human insight play in that process?
How can governance structures support
Responsible decision making.
Big question. Well, I think, as I had said in my remarks before, we are going to need new ways of figuring out how to make decisions together. So governance is fundamentally about how we all make decisions together. And the great thing about technology is that it does enable everybody to have a say, but it has to be designed in a way that genuinely, again, empowers everybody to have a say, while also, as Dave works on, screens out the misinformation and also screens out some of the noise. So yet again, I think it is really important to start with the political philosophers and the moral philosophers that think about the kinds of things that we need to, the principles that we need to guide the design of these things in order to enable us to govern at scale in this kind of new digital world.
And maybe, David, the next one is for you. How can insight from human psychology be built into AI to help build trust, encourage critical thinking, and counter misinformation?
It's an interesting question. And I feel like what we've found so far in the work that we've been doing is that the large language models are, as I said in my talk, surprisingly good at getting people to change their minds about things that we traditionally would have expected people not, beliefs that would be hard to change. And when you look at what the models are doing, they're not doing anything psychologically fancy. They're not, leveraging influence techniques and all kinds of, they're just politely providing relevant facts and evidence. And so I feel like one of the big take homes from this is that getting people to change their minds is actually maybe a lot of the time simpler than people in psychology have often made it out to be. So I feel like a lot of our work is more in the other direction of saying hey, actually it's, you maybe need less complicated psychological theories than you thought to explain what's going on.
Okay, well, that question for Casper, maybe you also have some thoughts on, David. Just how do we differentiate between human wants and needs and ensure that AI systems prioritize true human needs in a way that reflects the depth and complexity of our values?
Gosh, I hope that you do want the things that you need. You also use the first person plural here, our values. So in the talk today, I was talking about a much narrower, and it was intentionally narrower problem of trying to devise an AI that mirrors or wants what I want. I'm just one person. Wants what you want. You're just one person. When you talk about our values, things become much more complex. Even among my colleagues, if I ask some of them what you value, some of them will say, foremost, I value equity and justice, and others will say, foremost, I value responsibility and autonomy. And we all know, because there is such a thing as politics, these things don't go together, and they're not universally shared. So there is a much harder question of how, you get AIs to represent our values, when it may be that when you look at the intersection of our values, that intersection is not enormous. I'm inclined to think that the intersection is a little bit larger than a lot of public discourse would represent it to be, and that we can get something robust in a kind of universal human AI that at least values what we all value.
Even in the context of the simple problem of the AI trying to satisfy the desires of one specific person, I think that is a place where the psychology is important, in that there's all these theories around the short run self, the long run self, and intuitive thinking and deliberative thinking, and this is that people call the version problem, where usually you want to infer from someone's behavior what they actually want. but like you can have your, in the short run, you want to keep scrolling, but like overall, you actually would do good to get off and stop your doom scroll. And so I think that there is also even a tension there that models need to sort of be cognizant in some sense of the thing that the person is doing isn't necessarily like what they want to do in some more macro sense.
I wonder, Iran, does this question make sense to you in the context of the arts, of human wants, human needs, building agents around those questions?
Oh, man. Right. Well, so you kind of, it almost starts talking about what's the purpose of the arts, what's the purpose, and for me, music, because that's my domain. And it certainly reminds us of kind of what makes us human. But I also think that there's a real opportunity in the arts to bridge some of these gaps. If we were talking about values, and maybe Casper saying that the Venn diagram of common values is not that large, I actually believe that the arts is one of those things that can help increase the size of that. Because we all have the arts in one way or another. We can actually have dialogue about whether you like this or you don't like that. But even like the common experience of us all coming together that happens, say, at a concert, right? We all go and hear a concert for one common purpose. Like we're all there together to hear this amazing art being performed on stage, whether it's music or dance or theater or ballet or whatever it is. So I think that's where the kind of the real opportunity is going forward, if we're really cognizant of wanting to be together to have this shared experience.
So we are out of time, so I'd like to give Billy the chance for the last word. I'm curious, this semester, teaching the Compass class, what was a big surprise for you, or something you took away that you hadn't expected going into teaching the class?
That's a good question. I think, one of the biggest surprises is actually seeing that the data show that students being in this classroom together, talking about what is love and what is justice and what is truth, actually wound up changing how they think, how much they reflect, and how like they're able to talk to each other about sometimes really difficult things. So I think that was amazing to see reflected in actual data. I think the other thing that was really surprising was to see the professors that were on the teaching team together, because I have to say that since we're all teaching things that we're not necessarily expert in, I'm a political scientist and a behavioral scientist, and I was teaching literature and linguistics, and we taught Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the Friedrich Schiller poem for the Ode to Joy, and all of that that made the faculty so excited, which is why it's been so interesting to hear some of our colleagues be interested in, a faculty version of Compass course.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry we are out of time, but please join me in thanking our 4 presenters for their wonderful presentation. And of course, thanks to all of you for your wonderful questions. So I know that you are now in store for another dynamic segment as the MIT Alumni Association President, Natalie Lorenz Anderson, sits down with Institute Professor Sally Kornbluth for a special fireside chat. To kick off that moment, please enjoy the special video from the Alumni Association. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage MIT Alumni Association President, Natalie Lorenz Anderson.
Welcome. Good morning, everybody. How could you stay in your seats during that video, right? Very danceable. So as you heard, I am Natalie Lorenz Anderson. I am fortunate to be the Alumni Association President this year. I'm also class of '84 and have been proud to serve. It's such a pleasure to be with you, all of you, during this wonderful week. Our alumni returning, our families, our friends, the graduates this week, and Technology Day is one of the signature events, as you well know. I've been coming to these for decades myself, and I swear that they get better every year. Don't you think? The speakers were incredible. So I'd like to acknowledge that the video that we just watched marking the 150th anniversary of the Alumni Association, I really think it does beautifully capture the essence of our decades of alumni and the alumni who came before us in terms of their shaping of our past, present, and future at MIT. So I'd love to thank the MIT Alumni Association for the opportunity to be part of this special morning with you, for organizing this amazing tradition that reminds us of what makes MIT so extraordinary. If you've ever tried to take a drink from MIT's proverbial fire hose, you know what it means to be immersed in big ideas, and I think that's what you got this morning. We highlighted two new transformative initiatives already shaping the future of collaborative research through Mythic and HEALS. The efforts are not just remarkable for the breakthroughs they seek, but for the way they bring people together across disciplines, across departments, and across perspectives to confront some of the world's most urgent challenges. They reflect something I've always appreciated about MIT. It's our ability to ask those bold questions, to follow curiosity wherever it leads, and to combine science, technology, and human insight to make real-world impact. To Dean Anantha Chandrakasan and to our outstanding lineup of faculty, thank you for sharing your time, passion, and expertise with all of us. Now it is my honor to introduce the next part of our program. Special fireside chat with the 18th president of MIT, Sally Kornbluth. Since taking office, President Kornbluth has brought a fresh and urgent focus to some of the world's biggest challenges, especially climate change, human health, and the societal impact of science and technology. She's a fierce advocate for research excellence, for interdisciplinary collaboration, and for making sure that the work that we do here at MIT reaches well beyond our campus. She's also someone who deeply values the role of the alumni community, whether it's through projects like the Climate Project or initiatives like HEALS and Mythic. She sees a clear and powerful role for alumni as partners in MIT's mission. I'm looking forward to her reflections, and I know you are too. Please join me in welcoming MIT President Sally Kornbluth. Welcome. Thanks, Natalie. Lovely to have you here today.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
So I think with all the audience that's here today, many people were at commencement this week. So I think we need to have a quick question about what happened, and do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to say, and I'll address it in a more serious way in a moment, but I have to thank you personally for reenacting the brass ring turning, because I think that was a great symbol of the power of the alumni, and also the students really, really appreciated it. Look, I won't go into great detail, but I will say this. Our motivation in the way it was handled was to return the commencement to the families whose children were graduating as quickly as possible. In the moment, I just really wanted to calm the waters and move forward. The notion that we have then banned the student from participating in the diploma ceremony the next day. Look, I can tell from my email box that people have different opinions on this, but I will say this. It was actually based on two things. One is the fact that the remarks that had been submitted and rehearsed did not align with the remarks that were delivered. and that it was really just, to my mind, essentially a violation of our time, manner, and place rules. It was not the right time or manner or place for these comments. So I do think in the end everyone was able to really enjoy the commencement and the joy of their families graduating.
Yes, thank you. So it's also a serious moment for MIT, as you heard from a lot of our presenters this morning. American research universities, especially MIT, but all of them are under giant pressures right now, and the innovation ecosystem is at great risk. And I wanted to talk with you about that in a minute, but I do want to go a little bit to this morning's program, the amazing faculty that we heard from. So one of the things that you often talk about is helping to lead the people of MIT and doing big things together. And to make that possible, you've introduced a range of these amazing initiatives. I know I speak for many alumni. When I was back on campus 40 some odd years ago, it didn't feel like there was a lot of cross-campus collaboration, or maybe as an undergrad it wasn't that obvious, but it felt more stovepiped. And I think what has happened over the last 2 years, but even prior to that, but over the last 2 years with your leadership, I believe that you are really harnessing the collective talent of the community in these big swings, these big topics. So last year, when you were here at Tech Day, we heard you talk about climate. And since then, we've heard about the 2 initiatives this morning, and we know that generative AI and manufacturing, and there may be others that we'll be talking about. It's such a broad range. What in your mind links them all together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And before I get to that, I do want to give a huge shout out to Anantha, who really has been such a fantastic partner in getting all of these initiatives lifted off the ground. It's interesting. I think superficially they look like they don't have anything to do with each other. But one thing that you mentioned that I think is core to this is the notion that we really have to harness interdisciplinary expertise to tackle the big societal problems now. And that doesn't actually align necessarily very well with the traditional ways that departments and schools are organized. There are good reasons to have those sorts of organization, but they just don't facilitate the kind of resolution of the problems that we need now. But the other thing that I think, aside from the interdisciplinarity that I guess is obvious on the face of how these are described, there's a couple things. One is how we amplify the strengths that we already have. So none of these initiatives came out of thin air. They really harnessed the kinds of amazing things the faculty are already doing. But the other thing is, they're all designed to promote new collaborations, not only within MIT, but also with industry, with other entities, and also to be able to, to be able to catalyze excitement among the faculty in doing these initiatives. So you'll see a lot of them are structured such that, for example, there are seed grants involved. There's nothing to get faculty together to come up with big ideas like resources that will allow their minds to really, roam freely. And, I like to think of it a little bit as sort of like venture capital. We give them something to get them jump-started, and then they take it from there. And, the return on our investments are huge. Not just financially, obviously, but in terms of the incredible advances that we see in all these areas as a result of this work.
Yes, and you see the real excitement. The speakers today are just a great example. So many amazing topics, and the energy and passion behind it. It's lovely to see.
And it's actually really important in this time, and we'll get to talk a little bit about this when federal funding is contracting. People like to give to things they're passionate about and excited about. In reality, these all go to things like core, students, postdocs, faculty, etc. They are the engines that drive this. But I think, people like to know that when they're giving to an area that excites them and they're interested in. And so this is really formulating how we can drive these things forward while also providing an avenue for faculty to realize their best ideas and to obtain the resources to do so.
Absolutely. And you mentioned seeding these projects and initiatives. And that reminds me, you know, you did speak about climate last year.
Yes,
And I'm sure that
yes.
people would love a brief update on where
Yes.
is that project now? How's
Yes.
that going?
So for those of you who maybe weren't here last year, and just to kind of refresh people's memories, you know, the climate project at MIT was really started, again, to stimulate interdisciplinary collaboration around climate. But what we did was organize it into missions, you know, whether it be, you know, decarbonizing industry or frontier community, frontline communities, or what have you. And we, in the time that we last spoke, we selected leads of each of these missions. They've gotten the projects off the ground. And importantly, we also selected the leader of all this, Evelyn Wang, who many of you know was previously the department head of MECE and then became director of ARPA-E. And what Evelyn has brought to this, I think, is very important. You know, even though we have the MIT Energy Initiative, Evelyn highlighted the importance in the close collaboration between the climate project and the energy initiative, because the energy transition and achieving delivery of energy in a low carbon manner is one of the most pressing issues for the climate project. So she really, and I'll quote her here, she said, since the energy sector accounts for approximately 3/4 of global greenhouse emissions, climate change is largely an energy problem. By addressing these twin challenges, we can build a healthy, resilient, and sustainable future for all. And so she's really crafting with the mission leads how each one of those missions can answer these sorts of issues. But also we have started seed money projects, again, that can harness all of the individuals on campus who are interested in climate and energy. And the two areas that we have first requested research proposals in are sensing, sharing, and understanding the state of the climate of the planet. So MIT is fantastic at gathering information, analyzing information, sensing. And so I think that's critical. And I will just say as an aside, that's also aided by our great expertise in AI, because the sort of data analytics that are needed are certainly facilitated by AI. But the other area that might not be immediately obvious to people is heating and cooling solutions. As the world, particularly cooling, as the world gets warmer, a huge amount of energy is used in air conditioning. So finding new ways to cool, finding ways to do energy efficient cooling is going to be absolutely essential going forward. And it was interesting, we got more than 100 proposals on these topics. And so we're analyzing them now.
It's excellent. It was interesting. We were at the Met Warehouse yesterday for a tour. And, you know, right there you see in action the idea of applying it to MIT itself. Some of the things we heard about for sustainability at the building. That was really great.
I mean, that's core also, which is MIT as a sort of test bed of some of the things we come up with. And the students are incredibly excited about it. You know, I remember at the end of the year last year, I got a sort of letter with 400 signatories from students asking how they can participate in these projects. And they're very excited to have MIT be a pilot place for them to test their most exciting ideas.
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about Mythic and HEALS this morning, and when I think about Mythic, I'm reminded that we had a requirement to take humanities. You had to take 8 over the course of your 4 years, and whether or not they had a thread or a connection was difficult. So it felt a little bit compartmentalized from the STEM studies. Can you say a little bit more? We already saw some great presentations, but why do you think it's really important that we're focused on this?
Yeah, I'll definitely speak to that. I will say I kind of laughed because I think a huge amount of energy is put into coming up with these acronyms too.
Yes.
So that people can remember what we're talking about. I really liked the Mythic one. That took a little bit of ingenuity. Anyway, you know, Mythic addresses a couple of problems that I think are longstanding at MIT. One is that, you know, faculty in the humanities, although they're part of the Institute, given the incredible focus on science and engineering, really integrating their efforts with the rest of the Institute as incredibly important contributors to the education and research missions at MIT has always been somewhat of a challenge, because it's a huge, hugely disparate in numbers. But the other thing is that so many of the problems that we're dealing with, I mentioned AI, but addressing societal problems, but a lot of other things that we work on in terms of technology require, first of all, a humanistic understanding to design the best technologies, but also we have to think about the ethical guidelines concerning deployment, these technologies. So we want our students to be well versed in humanities and social sciences as well as in the sciences. Now, to attract and retain the very, very best faculty in these areas, we also need to encourage their scholarship and intellectual progress. And so when you look at Mythic, it's really sort of two different approaches. One is to really reward and encourage the scholarship of our humanities, SHAS and humanities and social sciences faculty. But the other is to stimulate novel collaborations between humanities faculty and the scientists and engineers. And, I think that's maybe not absolutely unique to MIT, but it's actually very unusual. You do not see this in many places, and you honestly don't see many places where the School of Engineering, for example, contributes to this both financially and organizationally. So it's been great. So we've put out initial proposals for collaborations between SHAS faculty and our other schools, and we had 89 proposals submitted. 32 have been selected for initial funding, and I just have to tell you a couple of them, which I've written down just because there's so many of them to mention. But let me just very briefly say, we have a Nobel Prize winning economist, Esther Duflo, and an EECS professor, Marzia Gassemi, who are exploring AI-based diagnostic tools to scale up access to health screening in low resource areas. We have a political scientist, Insan Sim, and a mathematician, Jordan Dunkel, who are studying U.S. legislative and law using mathematical modeling to reveal which interests dominate legislative outcomes. This is something we actually really need insight into right now.
Yes.
Yes. We also have a pianist, Mian Kim, and a researcher in IMS, Pranitha Namburi, who want to develop a biomechanical understanding of musical expression and skill development to bridge the gap between artistic expression and biomechanical efficiency. And then finally, I'll say we have something called the Living Climate Futures Lab. This is administered by the Anthropology Department. It includes 24 faculty and researchers bringing SHAS and STEM disciplines to explore the impact of climate change on our everyday lives. So, these are intellectually interesting and they're incredibly important for the future of our society. So I'm really excited to see where these things go. And I'll say another thing, which is I hope to be able to bring to this audience and others the sort of fruits of these labors and the insights that we gain. Because I think we're going to hear novel things and we're going to have symposia and updates and new ways to share the interesting findings that come out of this research.
That's great. Yeah, those the launches, for example, of Mythic last fall and Heels in December, those were, I think, well attended, and I do think there's an appetite.
Absolutely.
Not only alumni, but the audience at large, the country, the world, to know more.
I mean, I learn something every time I attend one of these things. It's amazing.
So, and then also on Heels, which we also had some incredible presentations this morning. The MIT is already known for innovative ideas in this area. Kendall Square is considered the biotech capital of the world. So there are people who ask, well, why does MIT need a special initiative on this? And again, we know from the examples today how important that was, but what can you say about that?
Heels is particularly interesting, not only for triggering collaboration within the Institute. I think what we have not had a coordinated way of approaching is our collaborations with the entities outside of MIT. So everybody knows about Kendall Square and being one of the most, if not the most innovative square mile in the biotech and biomed arena. But we also have this incredibly rich environment of hospitals. And honestly, this is not just a problem of MIT. This is a problem everywhere. I can tell you from the institution I was at previously that even owned its own hospital, which is getting collaborations between very basic scientists, getting collaborations between people who work on AI, computer science, etc., and those who are doing clinical work is not easy. You have to do it in a very intentional, very formal way, whether it's because of disputes over things like intellectual property, or more likely because people are just super busy. And if you have people, for instance, working on AI in isolation, they don't necessarily know which clinical problems to address and which have the greatest need for these technologies. So we were very fortunate. Vince Roche from Analog Devices gave us seed money to start, for example, in the context of Heels, to start an AI health collaboration with MGB, and MIT. And what that's going to enable us to do is have the clinicians on the ground define the problems where AI would allow them to advance clinical care most expeditiously. And, this will involve a lot of meetings, almost like what's the word, like social mixers or, match days or quick dating or whatever.
That's it.
Speed dating, to really allow these researchers and clinicians to interact frequently and figure out what the best areas are for innovation. And these hospitals have access to some cutting edge technology, but they don't necessarily have access to the kind of in-depth AI expertise, for example, that we have at MIT.
And the approach feels like a way to bring things faster, to get done faster, the things that matter most. Exactly. As opposed to, like you said, people studying things, but they don't know if it matters. It's really helpful. So we also heard really recently that you launched a new initiative for manufacturing.
Yes.
What would you like to share with us right now? Why is that so important?
Yeah, it's early days, but MIT has a great history of really the future of work, Made in America, reports have come out of MIT. Look, this is a pressing issue for our country right now. When people talk about onshoring or manufacturing in the United States, when people talk about problems with international supply chain, et cetera, we've got to have the expertise here at home. And this initiative spans from making more efficient. I mean, I was surprised to hear in talking to the leads of this initiative that many factories in America have no robots, and many have only one. So how do we try to enable more industries to take advantage of robots, automation, et cetera? But another element I think is really critical is workforce education. I mean, it's not like everybody who's going to be participating in manufacturing across this country are going to come, to MIT. And frankly, most people don't need the sort of very in-depth theoretical grounding in some of what MIT students get to be able to be incredibly effective in a new manufacturing economy. And so we're talking a lot about how we train across the United States individuals who will be participating in the next wave of manufacturing. And we're coming up with all sorts of ideas, both online and also ways to, train the trainers and have workshops and stuff. So that's coming along. So I think it's everything from policy to technology to education. And bringing that together all under one umbrella, I think is going to be incredibly productive. And this is another area where the faculty are drawn from across the institute and are just incredibly excited about it. And I think it can have a very, very real impact on U.S. manufacturing.
And it feels like soon, when we talk about healthcare research, it can take longer to see things.
That's right.
But this is the kind of thing that I
That's
feel
right.
like what you've described can be really quick. It's have it make a difference.
Particularly the education piece. I mean, we've heard from companies that have tried to establish, new manufacturing in certain areas where then they just don't take a work for it. And so if we can contribute to that, I think that will be incredibly important.
That's an area where vocational tech schools
Collaborating, where we can help with
Yeah.
curricula and help to move things forward. Absolutely.
Well, moving on to sort of the bigger question of the day about the impact to MIT, what's going on in Washington. I don't think I need to say a lot more about what that's been about, but I know that there have been a lot of conversations among alumni, obviously with you, with your team. Can you tell us a little bit about where things stand right now, and how are you thinking about MIT positioning to meet the challenge of the day?
Yeah, look, I mean, I firmly believe, and I say this to anyone who will listen, that MIT is an institution that is absolutely critical for innovation in this country, for national security, for defense, et cetera. So, and honestly, when I go to Washington and I meet with senators, Congress people in the executive branch, everyone acknowledges this. But the thing is, we are caught up in the dragnet of changes across all of higher education. And so we're not standing alone in this ecosystem. Our collaborations with our partners in higher education are incredibly important. So, look, it could be, we don't know exactly where we're going to land up. In the worst possible scenario, we could have a perfect storm where we could, have a 21% endowment tax, where we would have a 15% indirect rate on all of our federal funding, and where the direct federal funding from so many agencies could be cut really dramatically. I mean, I don't know what the final budget's going to look like, but the original proposals have cuts to the NIH budget, 40, 50%, moving from like what, 12 billion to like 3.5 billion or something with NSF, to DOE cuts. Even if DOD budget increases, it's not being spoken of as if those increases are going to be reflected in the research budget. So, we're looking at a hit to the Institute that could, and I don't think we're going to wind up quite in as dire a situation, but we're not going to be as we are now either. But in the worst case scenario, you're talking about a cut to our budget of a third. Now, I am not going to, if we wind up in that situation, I can tell you one thing I think we should not do, which is spread the peanut butter across the whole Institute. We're going to have to decide how we strategically pick our areas, because we're not going to be mediocre. We have to be able to invest in excellence, and that's going to be a long process. Now, I will say one other thing, though. Look, we don't know where we're going to land up, but Glenn Shore and his team, the EVPT, is really doing intense scenario planning. So we have a list of sort of criteria, conditions, etc., for every potential magnitude of cut we're going to get in every arena. Now, all this said, we are doing our best to try to stop the changes that are going to damage MIT. Look, we're not trying to poke anyone in the eye, but when it's appropriate, we're engaging in legal redress. So, for instance, the American Association of Universities sued, and were able to receive a temporary restraining order on the indirect dollar cuts to NIH and NSF and DOE. And we were essentially one of the lead named plaintiffs to step forward. In a slightly different cast of universities have been named in each one, but they've been between like 9 and 14 universities who have stepped forward. And we stepped forward because they wanted a Massachusetts venue. And so it was important to have a named plaintiff that was in Massachusetts. So look, we're trying to participate with our peers, but we're also trying to really crisply define. I'm going to DC, every week, at least. And, I've been meeting with folks on both sides of the aisle and really trying to, and people in the executive branch, as I said, and really trying to hammer home the absolute importance of the work we do. You and I were discussing, people aren't going to see an immediate change in their lives. If you look, for instance, at medicines and biotech, if we stopped all research right now, the pipeline of drugs might not go dry for another decade. So it's hard for people to see the immediate consequences, but it will go dry if we do not have any way to continue innovating.
Right, and so much wasted research that it's in the 5th or 10th year.
That's right.
Of an important 15 or 20 year, and you lose it.
That's right. I always tell people, we have a nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
It does. You have to pay to. You have to pay to operate that.
Is that a threat? No.
No.
The nuclear option. No, that's not what you meant.
No. Definitely not.
Oh gosh. So in April, you did write to alumni about many of these issues, and of course, with so many alumni gathered here, and of course on live stream and listening to this later, I would be remiss not to ask you, what can alumni be doing?
So look, there's a whole range of things, and when I sent the note out asking people to call congressmen and senators, etc., quite a number did, and I think that's important. Look, I'm not claiming that everything we do is perfect, and I understand that people have differences of opinion, and so I wasn't trying to plant any particular message, except that if people value the research and work and education that MIT provides, they should voice it because it is in danger. The other thing is just talking to your friends and family. It's interesting to me when I talk to people, even people who really should know some of the details here, they don't. And so there's a lot of material on the web about our endowment, about what we're doing, about our initiatives, etc. And I think it's important for people to be able to speak to these issues. I get asked a lot, for instance, why not just spend your endowment? And, we put up educational materials on this, but, aside from the fact that a lot of our endowment is restricted, and that people have given money with particular intent, we pay out about 5% a year. we're projecting 8% growth. That doesn't happen every year. And, you know, there's 3% inflation. So if we want to have intergenerational stability, that's important. Plus at MIT, and this is a message to carry, I think, everywhere, we provide free tuition to anyone earning under $200,000 a year. And, which, yeah, it's important.
It's a big deal.
And the other proceeds from our endowment are used for financial aid, and they're used to match almost dollar for dollar the money we get from the US government to enable our research. So I think spreading that message is important. Now, look, I wouldn't be able to be the president of an institute if I didn't also say, you know, if something moves you to contribute, please do.
Indeed.
We've never needed it more.
Yes, well said. So, you know, coming to the end of our talk today, it is easy to get distracted or disheartened at times by what's going on right now, but I love that MIT is always looking ahead. What can we do? How do we solve the important problems? And you really represent that for all of us. Can I ask you what you're looking forward to in the upcoming academic year besides frequent flyer miles?
Yeah. Well, look, you know, these initiatives are really exciting. I'm looking to see the outcome. Also, you know, every year when the new students come and I get to meet all these folks, you know, they're just inspiring. And, you know, you can be worried and, you know, a little bit concerned about where we're going, but, you know, MIT is going to be MIT. We will find a way. And the people, we still attract the very top talent in the world. And I just hope we can continue to do that because I'm really excited to see what they're going to do going forward.
You're here. Great. Thank you. So, before we officially wrap up and you all depart, there are 2 items to cover before we bring this day to a close. First, to thank President Kornbluth. Thank you for being here with us today and all weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Thank you all.
Or not. There it is. So I also want to extend a final thank you to our moderators, our speakers, the entire Tech Reunions team. They put together an incredible program for you today. And of course, all of you for taking the time, and a lot of you traveled from a long way, for being here and spending your time with us. There is something really special about being surrounded by people who are curious, collaborative, and driven to make a difference. It is the gift of being part of this MIT community that continues to move our country and our world forward as it has since 1861. The Institute has produced a new video that highlights these indelible innovations and societal game changers, all growing from that rare alchemy of daring minds, shared purpose, and hands-on ingenuity that can only have happened here. And so let's close Tech Day with a special look at the magic, an acronym you should get to know soon, the magic of MIT. Enjoy.
Imagine a world without MIT. A world where our culture of innovation and capacity to solve real-world problems was never put into play. Imagine a world where radar didn't help the Allied forces find victory in World War II. A world without Ethernet, or email, or maybe even the internet itself. A world without CT scans, time-release drugs, artificial skin, and optogenetics. A world with no photolithography, a technique that enabled the fabrication of every chip in every laptop, smartphone, military system, and data center for the past 20 years. Forget about 3D printing, where we continue to set the standard in innovation with multi-material techniques and personalized manufacturing. Imagine a world where our smartphones are a lot less smart, where there is no GPS or world standard methods for air traffic control. A world where cybersecurity is a lot less secure, AI is less intelligent, and bomb sniffing technology doesn't exist. Where space feels much farther away, and there is no Mars rover roving on the red planet. A world without an institute that fostered 105 Nobel laureates, 26 Turing Award winners, and 8 Fields medalists. We'd have more than 30,000 fewer companies, companies that are responsible for millions of jobs and trillions of dollars pumped into the economy. Imagine that. Now think about the potential of what we are working on today. Quantum computing and artificial intelligence advances poised to revolutionize cybersecurity, drug discovery, and medical diagnostics. Engineering and computer science innovations to protect private data, defend the grid, and power America's energy independence. Targeted, groundbreaking therapies for Alzheimer's and individualized treatments for cancer, Parkinson's, and new remedies for malaria. Innovations in drug delivery that simplify the treatment of chronic diseases that have the potential to save millions of lives. Adaptive technologies for easier aging and prolonged independence. Robots, from personal assistance to disaster response to ingestible microbots for medical applications. And fusion, an endless source of clean energy for everyone, forever. Can you imagine? We can.
Thank you for joining us for MIT Tech Day. On behalf of the Alumni Association, we wish you a wonderful remainder of your reunions weekend.